Everybody, and no, you will not fall asleep. For your safety, please fasten your seatbelt, okay? Because we will try to get this interesting. So it's like, I mean, Bitcoin blockchain. Alex was supposed to talk about that before me, but I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty confident that you have been exposed to the idea before. At least you know this cover from October last year. The Economist, blockchain, not Bitcoin, will prove revolutionary in finance and banking, okay? Really? I respectfully disagree, and this is what we will be talking about today. Because, yes, there is a lot of confusion. I mean, Bitcoin, Mark Andreessen say that Bitcoin in 2014 is like internet in 1994, weird and scary. And he goes on taking, a stance toward the companies that are desperately hoping for blockchain without Bitcoin. Blockchain without Bitcoin seems to me, and also to him, something like, the walled garden model of the mid-90s, late 90s, when companies, banks, institutions, they wanted to go online, but not on internet. Now, what does those mean? Well, it's quite complicated. But the idea was this walled garden experience, controlled access to web content and services, which was offered in those days by CompuServe, AOL, and to a certain degree by Microsoft. Now, the fear about going online was that online was unregulated. So you had hackers, anonymous agents, and it's not like those fears were unfounded. I mean, we are all aware of the risk of going online, but it is clear to everybody now that the benefits are much higher than the risk, okay? So the reason of so much confusion, and I will say even so much hype about blockchain these days, is that it's not well understood. So it promised major change for capital markets and other financial services, but few can say exactly how or why. And I'll tell you, mostly it is because people have not understood this kind of innovation. Bitcoin and blockchain is hard to understand because it is at the crossroad of game theory, cryptography, computer networking and data transmission, economic and monetary theory. So these are very broad subjects, and there are very few people which are able to master some of them. I don't think I know everybody who does master all of them, okay? And so another source of confusion is that it's not mainly a technology. It is a cultural paradigm shift instead. So if you approach it as a technology, something that can be in some way both off the shelf, well, you're wrong, okay? You have to try to understand what is going on, why it is disruptive, what is changing for real. So it's unfortunate that Pug has not spoken before me, but I'm pretty confident you have some idea of what is a blockchain. But let's start from the basics, okay? I will spare you with the details about the technical definition of blockchain as hash pointer linked list of block. But it is basically an append-only sequential data structure. Append-only in the sense that new blocks can only be appended at the end of the chain. And to change a block in the middle of the chain, well, that's a lot of work because a lot of computational effort has to be devoted to change something in the middle of blockchain. Basically, everything from that point onward has to be rewritten, okay? So the idea is that it's very, very inefficient compared to our relational databases, okay? Now, this kind of, in some way, poor data structure is used as distributed transaction ledger, okay? Every block contains multiple financial transactions, multiple Bitcoin transactions, and this ledger is a single file which is massively duplicated across network nodes with peer-to-peer protocol. Okay, you might be familiar with BitTorrent. Well, okay, it's similar to that. Instead of sharing music or movies or some other legit or illegit file, the only file you're sharing is this distributed ledger. And this distributed ledger can be updated by peculiar nodes of this network, known as miners, which are able to append new blocks of transaction, okay? It is interesting in the sense that all nodes of the network perform transaction validation and clearing, but only few nodes are able to put the effort necessary for the additional work required to settle transaction, okay? So it's kind of a distributed back office, okay? Not that glamorous at all. But the key point here, the key takeaway for you, I hope, is how do nodes reach consensus on transaction history? Yes, because this is a very hard problem. I mean, in distributed networks, where one of the nodes can be malicious or faulty, it's a positive result in computer science that you cannot reach consensus. So how is it possible that the Bitcoin network does reach consensus on such a delicate subject, in this case as the transactions, okay? Well, this problem, which is known as the Byzantine general problems, you might know Byzantine generals, they're Byzantine because at least few of them are traitors, and so they cannot meet in person, and they have to decide if to attack or not. And since they cannot have a summit, they can only talk to each other through messengers, it's a proven result in computer science that they cannot reach consensus. They cannot be sure that the strategy is shared by everybody, okay? Satoshi Nakamoto, one of his stroke of genius, reached consensus using a huge injection of game theory into a computer science problem. That is, he put in place an economic incentive for the mining nodes to be honest. Okay? So it does not solve this from a technological or computer science point of view, but thanks to the interplay between computer science and game theory. This incentive is used to compensate the miner nodes for their proof of work, for the work they've done. And it originates from seigniorage revenues. Okay, so the revenue that are generated from printing or issuing new money. So this is the key point of the Bitcoin network, that the issuance of new Bitcoins is used to pay, to incentivize miners, and to achieve consensus. Now, I mean, if we're back to the Economist cover, blockchain without Bitcoin, does it make sense? Well, if you have no Bitcoin, you don't have asset to reward miners. Without miner rewards, your miners must be appointed validator officials, cannot be just, anonymous nodes on the network. But if you deal with appointed validator officials, why don't you use a database? Why do you use a subpart data structure like a blockchain? Okay? This is something very, very funny about all these people talking about blockchain where they could use a database. And if you say something like, blockchain needs a native digital asset, cannot live without a native digital asset, this is breaking news, okay? So this video interview on Finextra is the most viewed video on Finextra on 2016. Do you believe that? Just because I say these simple, basic things. Okay, but now, so what is Bitcoin? We have kind of dispelled myth about blockchain, but what is Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is exactly the native digital asset tracked by the first and most relevant so far blockchain. It only exists as a scriptural asset, okay? It's a validated transaction recorded on this distributed ledger blockchain. And yes, it is a bearer instrument, okay? So it is not a registered instrument, mostly because the Bitcoin holder does not have to provide his data, does not need to do Know Your Customer. And whoever owns the private key associated to those Bitcoins is the actual effective owner. So it's like having cash in your own pocket. If you lose your cash and somebody finds it on the street, it's theirs, okay? There's no title of property attached to that. What makes Bitcoin special, and we don't have enough time today, but please, 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 I will urge you to have an intellectual moment of deep thinking, and amazement. Because what Bitcoin is able to reach, is able to realize, is to be a scarce asset in a digital realm, okay? As nothing else before. If you think about your digital content, that can be shared, as in replicated. If you give me your business card and I get hold of your email or phone numbers, I can send you papers, text, music, video, even the birthday movie of my daughter's birthday party with zero incremental cost for me, okay? But all of these things I will be sharing with you. I'm not losing them. If I transfer to you a Bitcoin, I won't have that Bitcoin anymore, okay? A digital asset which is scarce. Well, I mean, this fact that can be transferred but not duplicated, or somebody will say spent but not double spent, makes Bitcoin very similar, very equivalent to being digital gold. This is the brilliant, groundbreaking achievement by Satoshi Nakamoto. We might be on the eve, well, actually, the eve is gone. We are already living in a world where somebody has invented the digital equivalent of gold. And so, let's try to do a comparison between physical gold and digital gold. Well, you are all aware that gold has been adopted by all civilization without central planning, okay? And for centuries, gold has been the most successful form of money. The same is happening to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is the most successful form of cryptocurrency. Gold has bootstrapped all monetary system we know of. It has been surpassed by other kind of money without becoming obsolete. And I'll tell you, this is exactly what is going to happen with Bitcoin. It will bootstrap new monetary system, which might surpass Bitcoin, making it obsolete, providing better money, but without making Bitcoin obsolete. Some people prefer to look at Bitcoin as a form of money. I'm not included. I think that Bitcoin is a crypto commodity, it's not crypto money. But even if we compare, fiat money, like the money, like the euro, the dollar, fiat as in fiat lux et lux fuit, it's Latin, it's money which has value only because somebody has decided for it to have value, not because it's redeemable in something else. So if we compare fiat money and Bitcoin, we see that fiat money has no intrinsic value, but the legal tender and the social contract that is behind money. And Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, besides being gold in digital realm. Now, the security of currency in our world is based on paper and ink, while the security of Bitcoin is based on math and cryptography. For fiat money, we have discretionary governance. For Bitcoin, we have algorithmic governance. And the amount of money is governed by Winxillian interest rate approach. I don't know if you're familiar with Winxillian monetary theory, but the idea is that interest rates are used to control the monetary policy. And sorry to break the news for you, but we might see the failure of that model right now. Everybody told you about negative interest rates, okay? This is exactly the fact that the Winxillian approach might be doomed now. And Bitcoin instead has deterministic supply. So from time to time, I love to challenge my students. If an alien come here and you explain fiat money and I do explain Bitcoin, well, I'm sorry for you, okay? You're not going to look smart or brilliant. And Besides, okay, let's think about about blockchain as the basic infrastructure for a transactional economy. Well, in this infrastructure, Bitcoin is the only asset. Yes, I mean asset, because everything else is a liability. Everything else, let's say that I put on the blockchain the ownership title of my car, and I sell it to you, madam. Well, fine, we do this transaction, you're happy, it's been instant, no intermediaries, but then you have to go out to the real world and see if my car is working, if it has tires, if it has the wheel, if it is not broken, okay? So it's a liability I'm transferring to you until you assess that the real asset is there. It's a promise. It's a promise of payment. It's an IOU, okay? So please bear with me, but if we are designing a multi-digital transactional economy, we cannot design that without a native digital asset which can be used for payment and collateral, okay? Have we learned something in the last 40 years about counterparty risk? Are we really going to build a transactional economy only based on liabilities? I don't think so. Okay, Bitcoin does not scale. Most people worry about that. Yes, it's true in some way. Visa has about, 60,000 transactions per second. Bitcoin, 3 transactions per second. Okay? But if Bitcoin is digital gold, and it must rely on the world's most secure network, yes, because the Bitcoin network is the most secure network on Earth. There are no military or financial network which are comparable in security. Well, in that case, I do not use gold to buy a newspaper or a cappuccino. So probably we do not need Bitcoin to scale that much. Okay? Nonetheless, there will be off-chain solution, second layer solution, which will provide scalability in the order of million, or if you go with them, they even say billions transactions per second for machine-to-machine payment on a technology which is called Lightning Network, okay? Lightning Network is basically using the Bitcoin blockchain as a real-time gross settlement system, but it's gross settlement, okay? For everyday transaction, you don't use the most secure network in the world. You don't use the most secure network in the world in order to buy your cappuccino. And if you're interested about details, there has just been in Milan the Scaling Bitcoin 3 conference with a lot of material on how to scale Bitcoin. So if you are with me so far, Bitcoin without blockchain? Nah. Blockchain beyond Bitcoin? Yes. Yes, blockchain beyond Bitcoin is possible. And let me use an analogy, okay? 1992, to me, it was clear that email was the killer app. Internet app, okay? If you approached me at the time and told me, 20 years down the road, you will buy all your music and books in liquid form. Me? The fetishist in me? No, no way. You will plan your weekend and even, this exact conference using an online club called Facebook. Now, come on, I do prefer face-to-face interaction. Or you will ask question in natural language to a computer, expecting it to answer properly. Google search. Me, I would have not believed that. Yeah, science fiction. But in 1992, email was clear to me it was the killer internet app. Now, 2016, Bitcoin is the killer blockchain app. I'm confident that 20 years down the road, there will be applications that we cannot imagine yet. But trust me, we cannot imagine them yet. Okay? Because we have not really absorbed the Bitcoin paradigm, the Bitcoin disintermediation paradigm. And so it's like we're used to businesses which want to be at the center of the network, securing the network and locking in user. Instead, the distributed network has nobody at the center, and that's why it is intrinsically secure, because there is no central authority which can be hacked or attacked, but it pushes the risk to the peripheral nodes. And businesses will be mostly about serving those peripheral nodes into managing their own risk. So we'll see what goes down the road, but for the time being, the real deal is Bitcoin. There are already few applications which, in my humble opinion, makes a lot of sense, namely timestamping and notarization. It's like if you take a generic data file, it can be a Word document or a terabyte database or whatever you want, a music picture, it can be hashed, which technically means that we can calculate a unique short identifier, which is equivalent to its digital fingerprint. Okay? So now with this digital fingerprint of a document, we can associate that fingerprint to a Bitcoin transaction. The amount of this Bitcoin transaction is completely irrelevant. And so register this fingerprint on the blockchain. What we have achieved is that the Bitcoin blockchain immutability, because sorry to tell you that, but not all blockchains are made equal, and a lot of blockchains on non-Bitcoin blockchains are scam and they are not immutable at all. There are even consulting companies advocating editable blockchains. Now tell me, what is the difference between an editable blockchain and a database? Okay, I don't know. But the Bitcoin blockchain immutability provides non-repudiable timestamp because it proves that that data file has been in existence at that specific moment in time in that specific status, okay? So this is the ability of timestamping any document, any database, any transactional network, because we can imagine another transactional network whose security is achieved through timestamping into the Bitcoin blockchain. And this generic process, which I've just described, is even undergoing some standardization to achieve third-party auditable verification. And so with other colleagues of mine, we have submitted an answer to DLT technologies for securities market to the European Security Market Authority, where we do advocate the use of this process in order to solve some compliance regulatory issue that banks and trading institutions are facing. But I also told you that you could imagine another different transactional network whose security is granted by timestamping the status of that transitional network into the Bitcoin blockchain. And this is, again, a new paradigm, because we might look at this anchoring procedure like a way of tapping into security from outsourced providers. So miners could really become the providers of security to any counterparty. So that the security of your network, instead of being internal only, might be in part, and in relevant part, delegated to anonymous miners. And if you are uncomfortable with that, yes, that's why the paradigm is so new and need people to think about it. Other blockchain use case, we will see something even this afternoon about cryptographic proof, digital IDs, signature, well, not really blockchain-based, but often reinforced by the use of blockchain. As for the rest, it is basically hype. The question you always have to answer is, can it be achieved with the database? If the answer is yes, forget the blockchain. What kind of consensus is required? Because if the consensus is distributed, blockchain is the solution. But if the consensus is bilateral, like in signing both parties a PDF, or is centralized, like with a central counterparty for dealing derivatives, you don't need a blockchain at all. What kind of security is required? Preventive, detective, or corrective? Because preventive, yes, a blockchain will forbid any transaction which is not according to a standard, okay? Detective, Yes and no. These days, the blockchain is public. You can investigate all transactions, but do not count on that looking forward. Corrective, no way. Blockchain are immutable. So if you need corrective security, forget about blockchain. Last but not least, blockchain is not suited for storing large amount of data. Since all the nodes in the network have a copy of that distributed ledger file, you cannot put in that distributed ledger terabytes of data expecting people to hold that data for you. So the shifting narrative is 2014, Bitcoin. 2015, the economists covered blockchain technology. 2016, well, you are smart people, you probably noticed that blockchain is not really cool anymore. Today, we talk about distributed ledgers. But what are distributed ledgers? They look to me like bilateral database on secure messaging plus cryptographic proof. I call them database on cryptographic steroids. And this is what we will be talking probably next year, just to be back in 2018 to Bitcoin again, in my opinion. And what we're seeing now is that snake oil is mostly sold to bank, okay, when it comes to blockchain. Even the most relevant consortium, like the R3 banking consortium, was originally touted as a project intended to bring blockchains to finance. And well, they declared that they're developing Corda, which is a distributed ledger platform, not a blockchain. What is this Corda? We'll see. They decided finally to open source it. Yesterday, they announced the news, so we will be, a lot of people in the scientific community will be paying attention to it, and I might come up with some better analysis of that. But so far, from the public disclosure they had so far, it looked like a revamped Swift secure messaging protocol on, again, cryptographic steroids, which is good, but is evolutionary, not disruptive at all, okay? But why finance is fascinated with blockchain? Well, because blockchain transactions are immediately validated and cleared and settled shortly thereafter, automatically without a central bank. Now, can you think of a financial transaction which is immediately validated, cleared, and settled? Can you think about that? Anybody can come up with an answer? There is only one kind of financial transaction which has this characteristic. It is a cash transaction, okay? Cash transaction is the only transaction where the validation of the transaction, the clearing and the settlement is instantaneous. Oh, by the way, they want to deprive all of us of physical cash, just if you didn't notice. Now, the key point is that finance would love to have this kind of instant settlement, but the bottleneck for instant settlement in finance has not been technological at all. In financial transactions, we have, equity trading, which takes milliseconds or even nanoseconds to execute. The fact that it takes days to clear and settle is just a matter of a checks and balance system that allows for prescription, correction, and restriction. So we have a so-called consensus by reconciliation. We do want to reconcile multiple independent ledgers because of an organizational process, not a technological problem at all. So instant settlement. Well, a lot of people even talk about instant settlement without fully understanding the consequences, like instant settlement will reduce liquidity, making leverage, short selling, and netting almost impossible. Instant settlement, example given, an instant settlement payment network has a cost, a huge cost. Who is going to pay for that cost? Especially if you want financial transaction, or at least financial cash transactions to be free, who's going to cover that cost? And for whatever application you might think about blockchain in finance, the first thing you need is cash on the ledger. You need the digital equivalent of cash, but the bearer instrument, not the financial transaction which takes 2 days, for delivery versus payment. Without cash on the ledger, no finance is possible. Cash on the ledger is problematic. You don't have to trust me. In this case, you can trust Bank of England Governor Mike Carney. You can read its own word or go for the short version of it. Mike Kearney says that if we allow people direct access to central bank money on the ledger, these people will not use commercial and retail bank money anymore. Okay? So if central banks provide direct access to central bank money, the problem will be that the old deposit and saving business will collapse with systemic risk. So the IMF, International Monetary Fund, you might be aware that the IMF since 1969 is advocating special drawing rights. Okay, special drawing rights are synthetic assets which should be used as reserve asset by central bank instead of gold, but especially instead of the US dollar. The reason why special drawing rights are not really a success, they're surviving, is exactly because the US dollar predominance, well, there are strong powers which don't want to undermine that. So a free instantaneous peer-to-peer payment network will be a great opportunity for retail bank. And yes, that will be worth a consortium. Now, another myth about distributed ledger is a single shared data set. If we have a single shared data set, we can avoid the reconciliation, which is cumbersome and costly. But without a central governing node, how we manage priorities between conflicting updates? Again, we're back to the point where we started from. How do we reach consensus? Bilateral consensus? Come on, please. I mean, both parties signing a digital PDF is not really innovative. It's been here for 20 years at least. So do we provide a central governance? OK, so we're back to database admin. Please, let's use databases. And finally, last but not least, what if this single shared data set, which is the only one authoritative, is hacked? How can we recover? There will not be alternative references which are reliable enough to use to fix it. Okay? So again, a single shared data set, well, a lot has to be done in terms of consensus. Or improved automation, smart contracts. I mean, my time has run out, so I won't take you through it. But if you want to look on the internet for the DAO, you will see a major failure, like the first smart contract on the Ethereum platform, the first major smart contract on the Ethereum platform raised more than $160 million as leaderless venture capital. And then, a feature in the code allowed one agent to divert more than 50 million to his own startup. Was that a theft? No, if you ask me, because they claim that the code is low and that agent was acting according to the code contract. And OK, but the takeaway is beware extreme automation. So conclusions. Blockchain needs a native digital asset as Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital gold and could be as relevant in the history of civilization as physical gold has been in the history of civilization, finance, and money. Bitcoin can scale. Mostly will scale using off-chain scalability. Timestamp and anchoring are promising applications. There are unrealistic expectations about distributed ledger, a lot of hype, with no reference implementation, no public reference implementation available yet. Instant settlement, cash on the ledger, shared data set, and improved automation are not easy to obtain. Distributed ledger technology will be hardly disruptive, might be evolutionary database technology. And for more of this, I can tell you to invite you to download and read my forthcoming paper. Thank you for your attention.
Well, Professor, thank you. We'll have the questions afterwards with Alex. I think Alex has arrived.